The planet was silent, wrapped in endless ice and snow. Wind howled across empty valleys, carrying sharp crystals that cut like knives. The sun was pale and weak, giving no warmth, only light. It was a world where nothing soft survived, not even hearts. Among this frozen land lived a young alien woman named Soraya. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes the color of frozen lakes. Her people were known as the Illith, cold and distant by nature. They believed feelings made them weak. Kindness made them slaves. To them, love was a sickness, a dangerous lie. Soraya had grown up hearing these words every day. Her heart was locked behind walls of ice. Just like everyone else, but sometimes when the storm was quiet, Soraya would stand alone at the edge of the cliffs. She would stare at the horizon where the snow met the sky, and she would feel something move inside her chest, a strange ache. It was not fear, not hunger, not pain, but something different. She never told anyone about it. She was afraid even of her own thoughts. One night, as she wandered through the storm searching for food, the sky split open. A ball of fire tore across the clouds, screaming as it fell. It burned through the frozen air before crashing into the distant valley. The ground shook, snow lifted like waves, and silence followed. Soraya froze where she stood. Her heart beating fast, she had never seen anything like this. Her people said the skies only brought death. But curiosity pulled her forward step by step. Until she reached the crash site, the wreck was half buried in the snow, smoke curling into the icy wind, metal twisted and burned. Glowing faintly in the darkness, the air smelled strange. Sharp and alive, nothing like her world. Soraya approached carefully, her claws ready, her eyes sharp. She expected a monster, a weapon, something dangerous. Instead, she saw him, a human lying broken among the wreckage. His clothes torn, his skin bleeding, his chest rising weakly. His face was strange to her, warm in color, soft, fragile. He groaned in pain, trying to lift himself, then fell back again. Soraya's first thought was to leave him. Her people would say he was nothing but danger. They would tell her to let him die in the cold. But something inside her stopped her feet from turning away. She crouched near him, her breath fogging in the icy wind. The human opened his eyes, struggling to focus. For a moment their gazes locked, alien to alien, yet strangely close. His eyes were not like hers, they were filled with fire, not ice. And that fire struck her chest harder than any storm. The human whispered something, a word she could not understand. His voice was weak, almost lost to the wind, but the sound of it stirred her heart. She had never heard a voice that carried both strength and fear at the same time. He reached out a trembling hand before collapsing back into the snow. Soraya stared at him, her claws twitching. She had a choice, leave him to freeze or save him. Her people would hate her for even thinking of mercy. But for the first time in her life, Soraya's heart argued against her mind. The storm grew stronger, snow falling heavy around them. If she left him here, he would be buried by dawn. If she saved him, she would be breaking every rule her people followed. Her breath came fast, her chest heavy. She looked at the human again, his face pale, his body shaking. He was dying, and yet, when she looked at him, she felt something she never felt before. Her heart was no longer cold. It was burning. Something had awakened. Soraya grabbed his arm with her strong hands and pulled. The human was heavy, his body limp, but she dragged him across the snow. Every step was a fight against the storm, her claws digging into ice. She pulled him toward a hidden cave she had discovered long ago, a place where the winds could not reach. Her body trembled from the effort, but she did not stop. For reasons she could not explain, she could not let him die. Inside the cave, the air was still. The walls glittered with frost. Soraya laid the human down gently on the frozen ground. His lips were blue, his breathing faint. She looked at him with wide eyes, her chest tight. This was madness. This was betrayal, this was danger, and yet, she had done it, she had saved him. The human shivered violently, curling into himself. Without thinking, Soraya moved closer. She wrapped her cloak of furs around him. The warmth of her own body touched his skin. It felt strange, frightening, but not wrong. For the first time in her life, Soraya felt warmth spreading through her own chest. And she realized something shocking. Her heart was no longer silent. It had spoken, and it wanted him alive. The cave was silent except for the shallow breaths of the human. Soraya sat nearby, her silver eyes never leaving him. The storm outside roared like an angry beast, snow and wind crashing against the world. Inside, however, she felt a different kind of storm rising in her chest. She had never been this close to anyone before, not even her own people. The Illith avoided touch, avoided warmth, avoided anything that connected one heart to another. But here she was, sitting in the dark beside a dying stranger. The human stirred, his body weak, his face pale. He groaned softly as his eyes fluttered open. For a moment he looked confused, as if he did not know if he was alive or still trapped in a dream. When his gaze found her, his eyes widened. Soraya tensed, expecting fear or anger. Instead, she saw relief in his expression. He whispered a word she did not understand. His voice broken and faint, but his tone was clear. It was a plea. A call for help. Soraya had no reason to answer. She had no reason to care, yet her hand moved without her command. Bringing water from the ice she melted in her palms. She held it to his lips and he drank weakly. His breath steadied for a moment. His eyes still locked on hers, and in those eyes, she saw something dangerous. Trust. It unsettled her. Yet she could not look away. Hours passed, and the storm outside did not rest. The human drifted in and out of sleep, his body shivering violently. Soraya built a small fire from old branches she had hidden in the cave. Her people would call it madness to waste time on fire. But when she saw the human's body relax under the glow, she felt something she had never felt before. A quiet warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. She studied him in silence. His skin carried scars, his hands were rough, yet there was gentleness in the way he moved. When he slept, he murmured words in his strange tongue. Words she did not know, but even without understanding, she felt their meaning. They were not the words of an enemy. They were the cries of someone who had lost too much. Her people had always said humans were monsters, greedy and violent. But this man lying before her did not look like a monster. He looked fragile, breakable, yet stronger than anything she had ever known. And that strength stirred something in her frozen chest. When he woke again, he tried to sit up. Soraya pressed her clawed hand gently against his shoulder, keeping him down. Rest, she whispered, though she knew he could not understand her language. Still he obeyed, his tired body sinking back. His lips curved in the faintest smile, and she felt her breath catch. Why did that smile make her chest ache? Through the night she kept watch over him. Every sound from outside, the shifting snow, the roar of the wind, made her tense. If her people found him, they would kill him, and they would punish her too. She should have felt fear, but instead she felt determination. For the first time in her life, she wanted to protect someone, even if that someone was a human. At dawn, the storm began to weaken, light filtering into the cave. The human's breathing was stronger now. Though his wounds were still deep, he opened his eyes once more. Staring at her with a steady gaze, he lifted his hand slowly. Carefully, as if asking permission, Soraya froze, unsure what he wanted. Then his hand touched hers, weak but real. The contact sent a shock through her body. Her people would call it poison, but to her it felt alive. It was warmth, it was connection. It was something her world had never given her. She should have pulled away, but she did not. Instead, she allowed his fingers to rest against her claws. His voice came again, a broken whisper, but this time she understood one thing. He spoke his name. Elias, he breathed, his eyes pleading for her to know him. Soraya repeated the sound softly, clumsily. Elias. His lips curved into another weak smile, and she realized something terrifying. This human was no longer just a stranger. He had a name, and with that name, he had taken a place inside her heart. The storm had ended outside, but inside Soraya the storm had just begun. She knew what this meant if she kept him alive. She would betray her people. If she let him die, she would betray herself. And for the first time, Soraya realized she could not stay the same. The human's presence had already changed her. Her heart was no longer frozen. It was beginning to thaw, drop by drop. Every time she looked into his eyes, she whispered his name again into the silence. Elias. And in that moment, she knew her world would never be the same again. The storm outside had ended, leaving behind a world of white silence. Snow stretched endlessly across the horizon, the cold sharp enough to pierce through bone. But inside the hidden cave, a fragile warmth flickered from the small fire Soraya had built. It wasn't much, but for the first time in her life, she didn't feel entirely frozen. The human, Elias, lay resting against the stone wall, his breathing steadier now. The cuts on his body were deep and his skin was bruised. But he was alive. Soraya sat near him, her silver eyes watching. She had dragged him here. broken every rule of her people and given him life. Her mind screamed that it was madness, yet her heart refused to let him go. When Elias stirred awake, his gaze fell on the fire first, then slowly on her. He blinked as if unsure if she was real. His lips parted, but no words came, only a soft exhale that carried gratitude. Soraya tilted her head, curious. She didn't understand his words, but she understood his eyes. They carried warmth, something she had never seen before, something she feared but also craved. The silence between them was heavy but not empty. Every small sound, crackling fire, dripping water. His quiet breathing felt louder than thunder. Elias tried to move, wincing in pain. His hand pressing against his chest, Soraya reacted without thinking. Reaching out to steady him, her claws grazed his arm. But instead of pulling away, he held still. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the cave felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were holding their secret. Soraya gave him a piece of dried root she had gathered earlier. It was bitter and hard, but it kept her alive during long hunts. He looked at it, then at her, clearly unsure. She gestured with her hand, insisting. Slowly he chewed it, his face twisting at the taste. Soraya's lips twitched, almost forming something her people never allowed. A smile. Hours passed as the day crawled forward. Soraya worked to patch his wounds with strips of cloth torn from his broken clothes. The human watched her silently, his eyes never leaving her hands. Every time her fingers brushed his skin, a strange warmth spread through her chest. Her people had said humans were cruel, violent creatures, but here was one lying helpless before her, placing his life in her hands without fear. It made her question everything she had been taught. As night returned, the temperature dropped even lower. The fire grew weak, and Elias shivered violently. Soraya frowned, pulling her fur cloak tighter around him, but it wasn't enough. She hesitated, her breath caught, then slowly moved closer, her body pressed against his, sharing her warmth. His eyes widened at first, but then softened as he relaxed against her. For Soraya, the moment felt like breaking chains she had worn all her life. Her people had forbidden closeness, but this closeness felt right. Her heart, once frozen, now beat faster with every second she stayed near him. Elias whispered something again, his voice low and weak. Soraya could not understand the words, but the sound filled the cave like a melody. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his presence sink deep into her chest. It was dangerous, reckless, forbidden, yet she could not turn away. The next morning, Soraya left the cave briefly to gather supplies. The cold wind bit at her skin, but her thoughts were not on the storm. They were on the human lying inside, waiting. Each step she took away from him felt heavier. When she returned, carrying food and branches, her eyes immediately searched for him. Relief washed over her when she saw him breathing peacefully by the fire. She didn't understand why his survival mattered so much, but she knew this. She could no longer imagine leaving him behind. As days passed, the cave became their world. Soraya taught him small things, how to chew the roots, how to sip melted water slowly. He answered with gestures, with looks, with faint smiles, though they spoke no common tongue. Their silence became its own language. Every nod, every glance, every shared breath built a bridge between them, a bridge Soraya had never known could exist. One evening, as she sat watching him sleep, her mind wandered. Her people would never forgive this. If they discovered him, he would be killed and she would be punished as a traitor. The thought should have filled her with fear, but instead it filled her with resolve. For the first time, Soraya knew she would rather face her people's wrath than abandon him. She looked at Elias's face in the firelight. Soft and human, her clawed hand hovered near his. Trembling, finally, she let it rest beside his fingers, not touching, but close enough to feel his warmth. A warmth that scared her and comforted her all at once. In that moment, she whispered to herself in her own language, "Why are you melting my heart, stranger?" The cave walls echoed her whisper. The ice around her had not yet broken fully, but crack by crack it was beginning to fall apart. And Soraya knew deep inside that her life was no longer her own. It now belonged to the wounded stranger she had chosen to save. The cave had become their secret world. Days passed in silence, broken only by the crackling of fire and the sound of Elias's breathing. Soraya watched him heal slowly, though his body was still weak. Each day his strength returned, and with it, a spark in his eyes that unsettled her. She had never seen eyes like his, burning with warmth, filled with something she could not name. At night, when he drifted into uneasy sleep, Soraya often found herself staring at the flames. Memories of her people haunted her mind. The elders of the Illith had always spoken of humans as destroyers. They said humans carried fire in their blood. That fire would melt everything it touched. Even the hearts of the Illith, and hearts, they believed, were not meant to be soft. To love was to die. Soraya had believed it once, but now she wasn't sure. One evening Elias tried to speak. His voice was weak, broken by strange words she did not know. He gestured with his hands, pointing to his chest, then to her. Soraya tilted her head, confused, but her heart tightened at the way he looked at her. It was not the look of an enemy, nor of someone demanding. It was the look of someone reaching out for a connection, and that scared her more than any blade. She shook her head quickly, standing and turning away. She pressed her claws against the cold stone wall. Breathing hard, her mind screamed at her, "Do not let him in." Her people's teachings echoed, "A heart of ice is strength. A heart of fire is weakness," but when she turned back, Elias was still looking at her, his face calm, patient. It was as if he could see through the walls she had built, and that terrified her most of all. The next morning, Soraya left early to hunt. Snow bit at her skin, the cold air sharp, but her thoughts were not on the hunt. They were on the cave, on the human waiting there. On his smile, his eyes, his warmth. Every step she took farther from him made her chest ache in ways she did not understand. When she returned with food, Elias was awake. Sitting weakly by the fire, he smiled when he saw her. A tired but genuine smile. Her breath caught, her chest burning. Why did a simple smile feel stronger than the storm outside? As she shared food with him, she decided to break the silence. She spoke softly in her own tongue, words she knew he could not understand. She told him about her people, about the frozen traditions, about the way they silenced emotions. Her voice shook as she admitted what no one else had ever heard. "That is why I am empty inside," she whispered. Elias tilted his head, listening closely. As if every word mattered, he could not understand. Yet somehow he did. He reached out slowly, resting his hand gently over hers. Her claws twitched, but she did not pull away. Her heart hammered, her walls cracked. The firelight flickered across the cave walls, painting them in orange and gold. Soraya's breath grew unsteady as she realized the truth. Every second she spent with Elias was changing her. The cold that had ruled her life was no longer enough to protect her. Her walls of ice were melting, piece by piece, and though it frightened her, part of her longed for it, but fear was a cruel enemy. That night, Soraya dreamed of her people. She dreamed of the elders dragging Elias from the cave. She dreamed of chains, of fire extinguished, of punishment. She woke with a gasp, her chest tight, her claws trembling. Elias stirred, his eyes opening, his voice a soft murmur. He reached for her hand again, as if sensing her fear. Soraya froze, but then allowed his fingers to brush against hers. In that touch, the fear eased, replaced by something she could not explain. The days grew longer, and with each one her heart softened more. She caught herself watching him too often, studying the curve of his face. She caught herself listening for his voice, even when she knew she could not understand. She caught herself smiling, an act she had never allowed before, and every time she whispered to herself, "This is dangerous," but she did not stop. Elias tried to teach her small words in his language. He pointed to the fire, saying, "Fire," Soraya repeated clumsily. Her voice stiff, he laughed softly, not mocking, but encouraging. She felt her chest tighten, but this time it was not from fear. It was from something warmer, something alive. For the first time in her life, she was learning a language of warmth instead of cold. Yet deep down, Soraya knew this fragile peace could not last. Her people would notice her absence, they would search, they would find, and if they found Elias, everything would end. Still, when she looked at him sleeping peacefully by the fire, when she felt his hand brush against hers in the dark, she knew she could not let go. Even if it destroyed her, even if it broke every rule, the walls around her heart were crumbling, and she was powerless to stop it. The cave had been their secret for days. Soraya guarded Elias from the world outside. She hunted food, gathered wood, and tended his wounds. Slowly he grew stronger, though the cold still clung to his body like a shadow. And slowly, her heart grew weaker against the walls she had built her whole life. But secrets never stayed safe forever. One morning when Soraya returned from hunting, she froze in the snow, footprints not her own, led toward the cave, her chest tightened. panic flooding her veins. Her people had found the trail. She dropped the prey she carried and ran, her claws digging into the ice. Her breath burned in her chest as she hurried to the cave. Inside, Elias sat near the fire, unaware of the danger. He looked up at her and smiled faintly, but her heart sank when she saw shadows moving at the cave's mouth. It was too late. 3 Illith warriors entered, their tall forms cloaked in frost-covered armor. Their eyes, pale and cold, scanned the cave until they fell upon Elias. They hissed in unison, their voices sharp like cracking ice. "Human," one spat, as if the word itself was poison. Elias tried to stand but stumbled, still weak. Soraya rushed forward. Standing between him and her people, the warriors glared at her, their expressions filled with disgust. "You protect this creature?" one asked. Soraya's claws trembled at her sides, her throat tight. Her mind screamed at her to lie, to say it was a trick, a trap, anything, but her heart betrayed her silence. Her body stood firm in front of Elias, shielding him. That was answer enough. The tallest warrior stepped closer. "You break the law," he growled. "You bring shame to the Illith. You betray your blood." His words cut deeper than the cold ever had, but Soraya did not move. Behind her, Elias placed a weak hand against her shoulder. Even without words, his touch told her, "I trust you." The trust gave her strength. The warriors lunged forward. Seizing Elias, Soraya cried out, her voice echoing through the cave. Her claws slashed against one warrior's arm. Drawing blood, the others shoved her back, their strength overwhelming. Elias was dragged across the icy ground, his face pale with fear. Soraya struggled against the hands that held her, her heart pounding with helpless rage. They pulled Elias outside into the blinding snow. The wind howled as the warriors shouted their verdict. "He will die," one said. "He is human. He does not belong here." Soraya's chest twisted painfully, her voice breaking as she shouted, "No!" The warriors turned to her, eyes wide at her defiance. She had never shouted before, never dared to raise her voice against tradition. Her cry cut through the storm like fire through ice. The warriors sneered, dragging Elias to his knees. One raised a blade of frozen steel. Sharp and merciless, Soraya's breath came fast. Her mind racing, this was her choice: stay silent, obey the laws, watch him die, or break everything she had ever known and save him. Her claws dug into her palms until they bled. Her body trembled, but her voice was strong when she stepped forward. "Stop," she commanded. Her eyes blazing, the warriors hesitated. Shocked by her boldness, Soraya moved between Elias and the blade, spreading her arms wide. "You will not touch him," she said. The storm howled around them, but her voice was louder. The tallest warrior's face twisted with fury. "You are lost, Soraya," he spat. "Your heart is poisoned by this creature." His blade hovered close, the air frozen with tension. Soraya's chest ached, but she stood firm. "I would rather be lost than empty," she whispered. Her people's laws shattered with those words, and though her body shook, her spirit burned brighter than the fire in the cave. Behind her, Elias struggled to his feet. His hand rested weakly on her arm. He did not speak her language, but his eyes spoke everything. He did not beg for his life. He trusted her to fight for it. And that trust filled Soraya with a courage she never knew she had. The warriors exchanged looks, uncertain. Never before had one of their own stood for a human. The blade lowered slightly, hesitation breaking their icy certainty. But Soraya knew this was not the end. They would not forgive her. They would not forget by saving Elias she had declared herself an enemy of her own kind. As the warriors dragged him away into the storm, Soraya followed, her heart no longer silent, no longer cold. It was burning with a fire she could not put out. A fire born from a single choice. The choice to protect the wounded stranger who had melted her frozen heart. The storm raged as Soraya followed the warriors through the snow. They dragged Elias between them, his weak body stumbling with every step. Each time he fell, they yanked him back up, their faces hard as the ice around them. Soraya's heart ached at the sight, but she forced herself to keep moving. She knew where they were taking him. The circle of judgment, a place where no mercy was given. The circle was carved from ice at the edge of a cliff. Here, traitors and outsiders were brought before the elders. Here, punishment was swift and final. Soraya's claws clenched as they entered the circle. Torches burned blue flames around the edges, their light flickering in the storm. The elders were already waiting, cloaked in heavy furs, their eyes cold and merciless. The warriors threw Elias to the ground, his face striking the ice. He groaned but did not cry out. Soraya rushed forward, but the warriors blocked her path. "Step back," one hissed. Her breath came fast, her chest tight. But she stood her ground, her silver eyes locked on the elders. The eldest of them stepped forward, his voice sharp and clear. "You have broken our law, Soraya," he declared. "You sheltered the human. You gave him warmth. You defended him against your own blood." The circle erupted in whispers, voices filled with disgust. To the Illith, her actions were worse than treason. They were weakness. And weakness was death. Soraya's claws trembled at her sides. But she lifted her chin. "I did what was right," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The elder's eyes narrowed. "Right? You dare speak of right? You speak like a human." He pointed to Elias, who lay coughing in the snow. "This creature is poison. He will die and you will watch so that your heart remembers its place." A warrior lifted his frozen blade. Raising it high above Elias, Soraya's chest tightened, her legs shaking. This was the moment. Her whole life had led to this one choice: obey her people, protect herself, and watch Elias die, or step forward and betray everything she had ever known. Elias turned his head weakly, his eyes finding hers. He did not beg, he did not cry, but in his gaze she saw something stronger than any plea. Trust. He trusted her even now, surrounded by enemies facing death. That trust shattered the last wall around her heart. "No," Soraya shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. She lunged forward, shoving past the warriors. Her claws slashed across the blade, knocking it aside. The circle gasped. Shock freezing them where they stood, Soraya knelt beside Elias, pulling him close, her body shielding his. "You will not touch him," she growled, her voice trembling with fury. The elder's eyes burned with rage. "You have chosen," he said coldly. "You choose a human over your own kind." Soraya's breath shook, but her voice was steady when she answered, "Yes, I choose him." The circle erupted in shouts of anger, the warriors raising their blades, but Soraya did not move. Her arms wrapped around Elias, holding him close. For the first time in her life, she felt no fear. Her heart was burning too brightly to be frozen again. The elder raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "Then you are no longer one of us," he declared. "You are cast out. You will share the fate of the human." The words cut deep. But Soraya did not flinch. She had already chosen. Her heart was no longer theirs. It belonged to Elias. The warriors advanced, their blades gleaming in the torchlight. Soraya pulled Elias to his feet, his weight heavy against her. She knew they could not fight them all. But she also knew she could not surrender. With a cry, she dragged him toward the cliff's edge. The storm howled, snow whipping against her face. The drop below was endless, a sea of white mist and jagged ice. Death waited down there, but so did freedom. The warriors charged, their footsteps shaking the ground. Soraya looked at Elias, his weak body leaning against hers. For a moment their eyes met. No words were spoken, but she felt his answer. He trusted her, even now, even here. Her heart pounded, her claws digging into his arm as she whispered, "Hold on." And then, before the warriors could reach them, she leapt together. She and Elias plunged into the storm, vanishing into the frozen mist below. The world became a blur of snow and wind as Soraya and Elias plunged into the abyss. The icy air clawed at her skin, the roar of the storm filling her ears. She tightened her grip around Elias, shielding him with her body as they fell. For one terrifying moment she thought they would both die. But then the white mist broke and they crashed into a slope of soft snow. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, pain shooting through her chest. Still she held Elias tightly, refusing to let him go. They slid down the frozen slope until they landed in a deep hollow. Hidden beneath the cliff, the howls of the warriors above grew distant. Swallowed by the storm, the circle of judgment was gone. For now they were alive, Soraya groaned, forcing herself to sit up. Her body ached, but she ignored it. Turning quickly to Elias, his eyes were half open, his breathing ragged, but he was alive. Relief flooded her chest, her heart beating fast. She brushed snow from his face, her claws trembling. "You are safe," she whispered. Though he could not understand, her voice cracked. Filled with emotion she had never allowed herself to feel. The hollow was shielded from the wind, a rare pocket of silence in the storm. Soraya dragged Elias into the shadow of an icy wall. She built another fire with what little wood she had left. The flames flickered weakly, casting soft light across their faces. Elias shivered, his hand reaching blindly for hers. Without hesitation, Soraya clasped it, pressing his fingers against her chest. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. Her heart pounded beneath his touch. Strong, alive, no longer frozen for hours, she stayed by his side, warming him with her body, feeding him what little food she carried. The storm above raged, but inside the hollow, something new had bloomed. Not the cold emptiness of the Illith, but the fragile warmth of something stronger. Connection. As night fell, Elias stirred again. His eyes met hers, tired but filled with light. He spoke her name, clumsy on his tongue, but clear enough to reach her heart. Soraya. Her breath caught, her chest tightening. Hearing her name in his voice was like fire touching ice. It melted something deep inside her. She whispered his name in return. Elias. The sound of their names together in the frozen hollow felt like a promise. But danger still loomed. The Illith would not stop searching. They would call her a traitor, an exile, a heart lost to fire. If they found them, there would be no mercy. Yet Soraya no longer feared their judgment. She had already chosen her path. Her people had their laws, but she had her heart, and her heart belonged to Elias. The days that followed were hard. Soraya guided Elias through hidden paths beneath the ice cliffs. She hunted while he rested, carried him when he stumbled, and built fires in secret caves. Every moment tested her strength, but every moment also deepened their bond. Elias grew stronger step by step, his spirit refusing to break. Together, they became a force against the cold. Not enemies, not strangers, but something new. One night, as they sat by the fire in a quiet cavern, Elias reached for her hand. His touch was steady now, no longer weak. He pointed to his chest, then to hers. Though the words were foreign, the meaning was clear. His heart to hers, her heart to his. Soraya's eyes filled with tears. Her people had called love a sickness, but sitting here with him, she realized the truth. Love was not weakness. It was strength greater than any storm. When the storm outside finally calmed, they stood together at the mouth of the cavern. The frozen world stretched endlessly before them, silent and cruel, but for the first time, Soraya did not see emptiness. She saw a path, a future. Elias stood beside her, his hand in hers, their breaths mingling in the cold air. Her heart beat fiercely, no longer silent, no longer chained by fear. She had become something her people would never understand. An Illith with a heart of fire as they walked forward into the unknown. Soraya whispered softly, "My heart was cold, Elias, but you changed everything." He could not understand the words, but he understood the way she looked at him, the way her claws held his hand with care, the way her eyes, once empty, now burned with light above them. The cliffs of the Illith faded into the distance. The past was gone. Ahead lay a world where ice and fire walked together, and though the journey would be hard, Soraya knew one thing with certainty. Her heart would never be frozen again because it now beat with his.